All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on our YPN October 13th Latte and Learn on this chilly fall day. Give me just 1 second and I will get going here. I'm Caitlin Mancini. I'm the chair of YPN, and I welcome everybody. So as you know, this session is focused on ageism. Our guest speaker is Dr. Jenny Inker, and Dr. Inker has been an assistant professor at Virginia Commonwealth University, co-director of assisted living administration specialty area for almost a decade. She has a passion for disrupting ageism and sharing a message of hope and optimism with people of all ages, that aging is full of opportunities, growth, development, and lifelong learning. So, as always, it is essential that we thank our sponsors, our title sponsors for this year and their year-long support as we deliver education and networking opportunities: Blue Ridge Home Builders Association, Greenwood Homes, Tao Insurance Services, and UVA Credit Union and Member Options. I'd also like to thank CAR's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, DEI, for being today's event sponsor. I'd like to mention today that the charity is the Fluvanna SPCA. As you can see, I'm wearing my shirt. I sit as the president on the board currently. So I'm thrilled to just tell you a little bit more about the shelter. Most recently, we had a fall rabies clinic, which was fantastic. It's a drive-through rabies clinic, and we vaccinated 171 animals. We almost vaccinated one human, and everybody that came through had a lot of great things to say about our shelter. We are a very, very small shelter. Total, we're under 1,300 square feet in our shelter. The numbers change daily. Currently we have some Lonely Hearts Club members, which means that a dog has been with us for 6 months or more. So I always like to highlight the top three. Number one is Troy. He has been with us almost 2 years. It is very sad, this sweet senior boy. You can find all of this on Fluvanna SPCA, I'm sorry, FSPCA, fspca.org. One of the other ones is Cicely. She is a sweet senior female, and we don't know her background except she came in with a lot of issues, which was very, very sad. So she's had thousands of dollars worth of medical procedures done. She loves people, she loves other dogs, and the condition that she came from was deplorable. She's looked a lot better, but she's 12. She has had heartworm treatment and tumor removal, and she's had severe malnutrition. So we're just looking for her for a forever home for the last days of her golden years to live out. And then there's a couple kitties as well. They don't stay with us as long, but we do have some that have been two in particular that have been with us for 6 months or more. Usually adults. An adult is actually not as old as you think. An adult cat is only about a year, just over a year, to a year and a half. So females and males, domestic short hairs, tabbies, and a variety. So I was going to give you the stats right now of what we had in foster, but again, they kind of change. Our kennels are full. We always look for new volunteers. We always look for people who are interested in coming out and doing a variety of things, whether that be walking dogs, or if you're interested in cleaning or just organizing, or if you are a kitty socializer. So we are off of Union Road in Fluvanna. It's Troy address. So I welcome anybody's questions about the Fluvanna SPCA, but please donate today any amount through our GoFundMe link. Every dollar counts. Just $5 will feed a shelter dog for an entire week. So please donate any amount through the GoFundMe link, which is available in the Zoom chat, or you can scan the QR code that should be on the screen. Regardless of how much you donate, you'll be entered into a lottery to win a great prize. We'll announce the winner at the end of today's Zoom. And new this year, YPN will divide its year-end or end-of-year income and donate to various local charities, such as the Fluvanna SPCA. So is Dr. Jenny Inker, is she with us?
Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I will hand the session over to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Caitlin. And just let me take a moment to share my screen. Can somebody just let me know that you can
Yes.
see? Okay, great. Perfect. Well, thanks so much for having me this morning. I'm really pleased to be here with you. I know that time is precious. I'm sure yours is. And I'm so glad that you've chosen to spend it with me this morning talking about the bias that hides in plain sight, which is ageism. And I will explain what I mean about that. So just to give you an idea of where we're going this morning, for those of you, if you're anything like me, you kind of like to know what's ahead down the road. So this is what we're going to cover this morning in our time together. I'm going to talk a little bit about what ageism is, and we can talk about why it hides in plain sight. And I'm also going to discuss some of the normal changes that come with aging. That's going to help kind of lay the groundwork. Maybe it'll help us understand a little bit why it is we have so many stereotypes and prejudices that arise around the subject of aging and being older. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about communication practices that can be helpful when you're working with older adults. I'm going to caution right now up front, and we'll probably repeat this throughout my talk, but it's important not to generalize about people, including older adults. There's great individuality and great variation between people. So it's never a good idea to say, well, all older adults need this or will benefit from that. But in general, there are some helpful things that I can key you into, particularly that have to do with changes in eyesight as we grow older, that will help you communicate with people. And then we can talk a little bit. I hope we'll have enough time to just practice disrupting ageism through some practical examples. Okay, well, what is ageism? I think maybe the easiest way to think about it is as a think, feel, do phenomenon. And what I mean by that is we think about growing older in a certain way, and that causes us to have feelings about it that then will shape our behaviors. So that the things that we might think about growing older are called stereotypes, generalizations. Stereotypes are generalizations, typically about groups of people. While they may have kernels of truth in them, it's when we apply a stereotype to an entire group of people that we start to get into trouble. And so that stereotypical thinking can create prejudices, basically our attitudes about growing older. And then that can cause us to either do things that are discriminatory, even if we're not trying to be harmful, or failing to do things that would be helpful. So that doing part is both failing to do and doing. And I should point out here, stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination around age is not relegated to simply being older. We do this to younger people too. Most of the people who get a break are people in midlife, seem to get cut some slack, but we focus a lot of negative stereotyping towards younger people as well as towards older people, making assumptions about people and what they are and are not capable of based on their age. So let's look at an example. So I mentioned here, this is about making generalizations that then can lead us to developing negative feelings and then discriminating. So what might that look like with regard to older people? So we might think, well, old people are sad and lonely. Everybody knows that, right? When you become older, it's kind of sad. Nobody wants to get older, and old people are lonely. That's like, everybody knows that. We then might feel that, well, gosh, I don't really want to spend a lot of time with older people because that's going to make me feel sad because they're sad. And then we think, well, maybe I should avoid old people. And you may not have ever thought or felt any of these things, but honestly, there are a lot of people that have. And it's interesting, at VCU, one of the things we do is study the attitudes of medical students. They're called M1s, the first year medical students. And this is very characteristic for what a lot of medical students think. I don't want to work in a long-term care setting. It'll be too depressing. So let's see, I think I have another example here. So with ageism, the interesting thing about it is we can not just direct it towards other people, but we can direct it towards ourselves. And we do direct it towards ourselves. We internalize it. And so we might think about ourselves, well, gosh, getting older is pretty terrible from what I can make out. It's all going to be downhill from here. So we have these negative thoughts about ourselves growing older. And then that can lead us to feel less motivated and like, why should we care? What can we do? It's going to be terrible, right? And then we think, well, I won't bother seeing the doctor when something is wrong. And we have over 50 years of research that demonstrate that this kind of thing happens. It's called a self-fulfilling prophecy, that somebody won't attend to health behaviors if they have a really negative attitude to growing older. They may think, well, what can you expect? I mean, I'm 80. Of course I'd be in terrible shape. And unfortunately, the doctor may also think that, because doctors are often very steeped in ageist thinking as well. Ageism among healthcare professionals is a really, really big challenge that we have. So we can internalize this thinking, and it can become something that we don't even notice. But I mentioned at the beginning that ageism hides in plain sight. What I mean by that is, drive down the highway and notice the billboards that you see. And I guarantee you won't have to drive many miles before you see a billboard that encourages you to fight the visible signs of aging. As if aging is a war and it's very important that we should take up our weapons against it, that we should deny that we're getting older, do not let your hair go gray, cover up your wrinkles, try to prevent your wrinkles occurring, do everything you can to look younger, because nobody wants to look older. It's a war we're fighting. Now, if you stop and think about that for a moment and think about just how ugly it is that there is a multi-billion-dollar industry whose goal is to shame us into buying products, shame us about natural changes that make them wealthy. And I think that is really, really sad. Go down the birthday card aisle in the grocery store, pick up a birthday card. When you're 5, it's really fun. You get balloons, you get a pin or a badge. Everybody's celebrating. Pick up the cards for people who are older, and some will be nice and some will be celebratory, but many are really, really awful. They're mean. They say really mean jokes about being older and basically equating it with being incapable or a figure of fun. And stop and think about that for a moment. Why would we do that? Now, humor is interesting. Humor is a way that we all cope with things. Humor helps us to cope with challenging things, and there certainly are some challenges with growing older. But really, I wonder why we don't question more, why we take such a negative view and are so forgiving of such negativity around the beauty of growing older. So let's have a look at what are some of these normal changes of aging that kind of fuel some of these stereotypes. Well, I'm not telling you anything you don't know from your own experience. As we grow older, our bodies change. Our hair tends to go grayer. That happens at different rates. Our skin becomes more wrinkled. It becomes thinner and less elastic, which is the reason for those wrinkles. And it becomes more fragile. And our eyesight changes. So most people at midlife have to start wearing reading glasses. That's often a threshold moment for many people when they're like, oh gosh, I think I'm getting old because I have to wear glasses to see. It's because of changes in the eye. They're just totally normal changes. The lens of your eye yellows over time as well, and that can make it more difficult to see certain colors, like color combinations in printed material, like blue on green or green on blue, are pretty hard to see as you get older. And we'll talk about that later in some good communication practices. Joints experience more wear and tear. I certainly know at age 61, I get stiffer much quicker. If I sit for too long, it takes me a while to unbend when I get up. So I need to make sure that I move around a lot. These are just totally normal changes. There are changes in our minds. Now, one of the most feared changes of growing older, people think, oh, I'm going to get dementia. I'm going to lose my memory. Well, that's not a normal change of aging. Dementia is a neurodegenerative disease of the brain, and it is not normal aging. So I'm talking about normal aging. And what we know about how our minds change is that our fluid intelligence slows down, decreases, and our crystallized intelligence increases. Now, what do I mean by that? Fluid intelligence is our ability to problem solve like solve math and logic problems, we do this more quickly when we're in our 20s. And from probably mid-20s onwards, we begin to slow down. I think the slowing down is fairly imperceptible for quite a long while, but we definitely slow down at that kind of like intellectual processing. However, there's a different kind of cognitive activity that's still increasing. I'm 61 and it is still increasing for me. And that is crystallized intelligence. That's ability to have integrative thought, to see patterns, to see the big picture, to make connections between things, vocabulary. These things all continue to increase well into your 60s. And so what we know from laboratory studies is that while that fluid intelligence, that speed of processing has slowed down, older people tend to compensate for it with greater crystallized intelligence. So you don't even notice the slower processing most of the time in the real world. Recall does slow down. And we have more what I would call tip of the tongue moments. I'm sure you've had them no matter what age you are, where there is a word on the tip of your tongue and it will not come off the tip of your tongue. And you're there saying, oh, the cup. Oh, right. I was trying to say cup. So this happens increasingly as we grow older, because if you think about your brain like a file cabinet, it's fuller than it was when you were younger. It has more files in it. You're going to spend longer searching through it. These are not indications of dementia, that you can't remember a word, that you didn't know where you placed your keys. These are normal changes of aging. Now, there are signs of abnormal or pathological changes, like not recognizing people who are very familiar to you. That would be a symptom of dementia. But these tip of the tongue moments and these kind of these episodes where, so you can't call something to mind, or it takes you a while to call something to mind, are totally normal. What we do, though, is we make them into negative stereotypes by saying, oh, I just had a senior moment. See, my brain's not working, or, oh, I've got dementia. Well, dementia is a really difficult, challenging disease, not something really to joke about. And so when we think about like the language that we use, we can start thinking about how we might say things differently, like not, oh, I'm having a senior moment, but that word was on the tip of my tongue for like 5 minutes, but it finally came off. What I tend to say these days, I say it to myself and I say it to other people when I have a tip of the tongue moment. I just say, it's okay. The word will come. It'll come in a minute. It'll be fine. Because you don't want to add anxiety to that situation. We also know we change socially. And the negative stereotype is that old people are sad and lonely and they're so isolated. Okay, there are people of all ages who are sad, lonely, and isolated. In fact, the crisis of loneliness is probably more severe amongst younger people in our society than it is amongst elders. But what we do see as a normal change of aging is there is an increased interest. It's called socio-emotional selectivity. It's an increased interest in pruning our social relationships. As we grow older, we become more selective. We decide, what, some people are just not so good for us, and we don't feel the need to have them in our lives or so closely in our lives. And so this very deliberate pruning begins to happen. And it's probably connected to a sense that the road ahead, if you're older, the road ahead is shorter for you than the road behind. So at 61, the road ahead of me is now shorter than the road behind me, as I've lived already more years than I am likely to go on living from this point forward. And it can really focus your mind and make you think about who and what is truly important to you. And then finally, in our spiritual dimension, because of course we are biopsychosocial spiritual beings, there is this idea, it's called gerotranscendence. It's sort of some people believe in it, some people don't, but it's this idea that as we grow older and we spend more time on inner reflection, thinking about our lives and the purpose and meaning of our lives, that we develop a greater sense of connection with a higher power or the cosmos or God or gods, or however you might conceive of this. But it's a kind of like a reduced interest in materiality and an increased interest in spirituality. Now, I wouldn't say that that necessarily is, everybody's experience, but it certainly seems that there's some potential for that as we grow older. Generativity is about simply mentoring and guiding people that are younger than us. And so you'll often see this behavior, say, in grandparents who have great interest in mentoring grandchildren. Older colleagues may have great interest in mentoring younger colleagues who are at an earlier stage of their career. That's what generativity is. And practical wisdom is a potential development in our older age. Now, you've probably heard the expression, there's no fool like an old fool. It's a good expression, because what it reminds us is that the accumulation of years is not enough to make us wise. You can live 90 years and not be wise. It takes not only the lived experience, but the ability to reflect on your lived experience and have some insight into your lived experience to be able to learn something from it. So there is this potential to experience and to share practical wisdom. So you can see, I think, this is a really mixed bag. There's decline in here. The body is definitely going to decline over time, but there's also growth. We see this cognitive growth and the spiritual growth, and we see this social reshaping. And we adapt to new normals as things change for us as we grow older. And then we also learn how to maintain those new normals. So it's a very mixed bag with trajectories going in all kinds of different directions. It's anything but and everything goes downhill from here kind of situation. Okay, so that just to lay the kind of groundwork about what ageism is and what normal aging actually involves. I'm just going to segue here briefly and talk a little bit about some helpful communication practices that'll tie into some of the things that I shared with you about the changes in our bodies. So I think these are good practices for everybody. Some of them specifically really apply to working with older adults, and you choose your definition of older. Here's one of the challenges we have. What does it mean to be old? I mean, there's no really good answer to that. Social Security says it's the age at which you draw Social Security, but that differs for people depending on when they were born. So that could be 65, it could be 67. Medicare would say it's 65. But there could be people, like take an example of me. I'm 61. My mother is 91. My daughter is 25. To my 91-year-old mother, I am young. That's what she'll tell you. To my 25-year-old daughter, I am old, and that's what she will tell you. So it's also really relative. So when I say these are helpful communication practices for older people, they're for all people, but as we know the way that the brain changes as people grow older, then these will be particularly helpful. And I think the first one is to limit distractions. Okay, so limits the, audible distractions. If the TV is on, or if you're in a crowded room, or you're in a room where there's, there might be difficulty hearing, there are a lot of people talking. Not all older people have hearing impairments. They may be relatively common, but you definitely shouldn't assume that all older people have hearing impairments. But I can tell you, I really struggle in rooms where a lot of people are talking at once. It's really, really hard for me to process. And I don't think I'm alone in that. So talking in a place where there are limited distractions is very helpful. Talking to each person as an adult is also really important. And there is this phenomenon called elder speak, where we might adopt a kind of sing-song voice and start saying, "Oh, how are you?" And we're trying to connect. We're trying to be friendly. It's infantilizing, though. "Hello, dear," is something you might hear. "Oh, sweetheart." So, it's really important to call people how they want to be called. If somebody likes to be called sweetheart, call them sweetheart. If you've asked them and they like that, do it. But, if they want to be Dr. Inker or Mrs. Inker or Jenny or Jennifer, you're only going to know that by asking. So don't condescend. Treat people as the adults that they are. An older adult let's take an older adult who has some frailty. Okay, so the body can become more frail as we grow older. This doesn't mean that this person isn't still an adult. And an adult with a cognitive impairment is still an adult. They will never be a child again. No matter how vulnerable they might be or how many needs they might have, they will always be an adult. And people will know when you're treating them like an adult, and when you're not. So I think it's really, really important not to condescend. As I said, don't assume the person has hearing challenges. So, you don't need to, and you see an older person, you don't need to automatically raise your voice so they can hear you. And I'm going to tell you right now, I have done many of these things. Like prior to getting training as a gerontologist, I would have been guilty of a number of these things. And actually, I can remember a woman once looking at me and saying, kind of pityingly, I can hear you just fine. You don't need to shout at me. So you don't want to assume that people have hearing challenges. I think this is a really big one. Do not rush. We live in a society just sick with hurry, absolutely sick with hurry. People talk fast, move fast, expect everything to be done fast. And it's really, really hard to take things in when people are talking at you fast. And I will tell you, at age 61, I am already aware when I'm in a store and I am not moving fast enough at the checkout. I've not put the coins back in my purse quickly enough. I hear the sighing. I see the eye rolls. Like, why are we in such a hurry? If you want your messages to be understood, to be received, don't rush. Make sure that you have booked the time you need to walk somebody through whatever it is. And I would imagine in your line of work, some of the conversations are going to be somewhat complicated, and they may need repetition as well as not rushing. So try to limit that information that you deliver in one go. That's another helpful thing to do, the kind of, scattershot, like telling people 3 different things in quick succession, I think may be really challenging for some people. So trying to cut this down to a manageable amount of information. Giving people reminders in writing is really important. Things that somebody can go back to later and check. You'll know, if you go to the doctor, you'll know they do that, right? They're very good at that. You have your little meeting with the doctor. They never last very long because they're always in a rush. They don't have a lot of time. And then they'll send you home with a whole bunch of paperwork, and you can go and, you can read that later. And I always think too, what we know about the science of teaching and learning, people are able to maintain attention for about 5 minutes, after which it begins to tail off. So again, cutting things into manageable chunks is helpful. With regard to documents that you may give people or that you may share with people or show people, please be aware of glare. It is such a challenge. From around late midlife, many people begin to struggle with glare. And so reading a watch face can be really hard. Reading a computer screen that's at the wrong angle can be really hard. Reading a laminated document can be almost impossible if the light is shining on it wrong. And if you're younger and you have not experienced these changes with your eyes yet, you'll be like, what are you talking about, Jenny? This document's really easy to read. Yes, for you, it is. I have such a huge problem with glare. Like laminated documents are the worst. I have to hold them in a certain way to be able to see them. And this is not just me. This is a change in our bodies that, that most people will experience. So be aware of documents with glare. And just in general, when you are giving people printed material, using a sans serif font, that means it doesn't have the little squiggly bits on the bottoms of the letters. So Arial is a sans serif font, doesn't have the serif, which is the squiggle, no smaller than 12 point. I would say if you're printing it out, 14 would be even better. But you can also ask people if they need things printed out in a larger font size. You're probably well aware, like the public libraries, they have large print books for people that have difficulty seeing smaller fonts. So some of those smaller fonts and the serif fonts can be really difficult for people to see. But black on white, it gives you that really good distinction, makes it much, much easier to see. All right, let's then, I'll begin to head towards the close here because I want to leave time for questions and probably discussion. I hope this is, sparking some things in your mind. I want to give you some everyday examples of ageism and some thoughts about how we might be able to disrupt them. So let's take this one first. So in this case, this is actually a real quote from an older adult. This is from some of our research. I'm not old, I'm just more mature. So what's going on here? This is a person saying, don't call me old because I know that old is the bad thing. I don't want to be in the out group. I don't want to be in the negative category. I'm not old. I'm just more mature. I'm going to reframe this as a positive thing. I've developed a lot of maturity. So here, I think what we're seeing is a reflection of the societal stereotype. This individual knew that it's generally not considered a good thing to be older, and they don't want to be seen in a bad light. They want to be recognized as a valuable individual. And so they say, please just say I'm more mature. Well, what could we say instead? I'm 61 and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of my life. I'm proud of my learning. I'm so happy to be here, right? I'm not apologetic about growing older. It's natural. There's nothing I can do to stop it anyway. We're all doing it. It's entirely natural. How about this one? I don't want to get old. Lots of people have thought that one. I don't want to get old. It's going to be awful. I don't like anything about it. And actually we meet lots of people who are quite anxious about their aging at a really young age. We meet and do research with, and we teach people in their 20s on up who, you know, some of them come to us quite anxious about the idea of growing older. And life is a mixed bag. We all, at all stages of our lives, are going to face things that are not so nice and other things that are really nice. And it's the same with older age. It's a very, very mixed bag of all kinds of things, including some really beautiful things. So a counter to this might be growing older is a mixed bag. I am slower. Yeah, I have more tip of the tongue moments. I am stiffer. There is no doubt in my mind about all of that. And I am so much wiser. Oh my gosh. If I only had known when I was 25 what I know now, how different things might have been, right? I am definitely wiser. I'm definitely calmer, much better at regulating my emotions, much better at knowing what is right for me. So it's really, there's a lot of nice things in the mixed bag. All right, this one is a classic, I'm afraid. You enter a room and there's an older woman in the room and you say, "Good morning, young lady," in your cheerful voice. Gosh, what's happening here? This is definitely what we would call a social compliment. You know, even if you haven't thought about it, that the good category is to be young. And so you're trying to pay this person a compliment. You're trying to say, "Hey, young lady." And that person might even respond to you really positively and say, "Hi," and it makes them feel really good. You call them young lady. It's so fun. But let's think for a moment about what we're doing. We're denying that this is an older woman. We're denying all of the things that come with her life wisdom, her long years of experience. And we're just kind of replicating the cultural narrative that it's better to be young. And the simple solution is just to greet her by her name, not to make a comment about her age. Another really classic one, and I was guilty of this one myself too. I worked for a long time in senior living residential communities before I went and got a gerontology degree. And, you know, people would celebrate their birthdays and, you know, somebody would be turning, I don't know, let's say 92. And I would say to them, "Oh, you look amazing for 92. You look just so beautiful for 92. Well, what was I doing? Definitely trying to give this person a compliment. But what was I actually saying without meaning or intending to say it? I think probably, well, 92 is pretty crappy, but you don't look crappy. You look pretty good. So our words matter. And sometimes, like, it's not the words themselves, it's what's implied by the words that kind of gets us in trouble. How about this one? Older people are so vulnerable. They really need our help. Now, we might look at older people. We might even have some really good evidence that some older people we work with are pretty vulnerable. I'm not going to deny this. My mother at 91 is definitely more vulnerable than she was. But here, what you're seeing is grouping all older people into one group. Older people are so vulnerable. They really need our help. So there's a stereotyping, a generalization of an entire group of people. What might we do instead? Well, We might think to ourselves, okay, all people are individuals. Older people are people, so they're individuals. Let me find out what this person needs from me. I wonder what this person needs from me, right? Because they might need things from you. They might need some extra help, but what does this person need? And then we hear these all the time, that the aging of our population is a crisis. I don't know if you've ever heard this term silver tsunami, but we hear it a lot, meaning essentially that there's so many older people in our population now. They're like this big silver wave. A tsunami, of course, is a giant wave. Well, did you watch what happened in the last tsunami in Japan? It was incredibly destructive. That's what they do. They destroy livelihoods, they destroy landscapes, they overwhelm, they swamp. Is that a very nice way to talk about the fact that we have a lot more elders in our population, to describe them as a destructive natural force? I mean, it's a nice little alliterative phrase, but if you think about it, it's really rather ugly. And so what might we say instead? We might just talk about the older population, or the longevity boom. How about that? I mean, there's a lot of benefits to having older people, to having more generations alive at the same time in terms of practical wisdom. So we could instead of wringing our hands about the crisis of our population growing older, ask ourselves, all right, well, what plans do we need to make so that all people have opportunities and feel valued as they grow older? It's not the soundbite that you get from Silver Tsunami. That's the problem, right? Silver Tsunami just rolls off the tongue. This doesn't roll off the tongue. But the intention is really like, hey, maybe we should inspect that idea that old people are going to drag our society down. So I'm going to end here and open it up for questions, but I would encourage us all to start with ourselves. It's certainly not my mission to turn you into the ageism police, or to have you go around policing or patrolling your language or other people's language or anything like that, but rather to think to yourself, what does it mean to you to be old, to grow old? How do you feel about yourself as a person who is aging? Because of course we're all aging. Aging isn't something that has just happened to old people, and it isn't happening to you and won't happen to you until you become an old person. We're all aging. We've always been aging right from the moment of conception. And right now you're the oldest that you've ever been in your life. So you might want to start thinking about how you think about growing older just inside yourself, how you talk about it, and what you notice about it in the world around you. And that can be a really good place to start when thinking about, how could I, how could I be more inclusive and treat everyone more as an individual, which I would call being person-centered. How can we be more person-centered and not immediately categorize people by their age? Well, I know what this person will be like because they're young, or I know what this person will be like because they're old, but to find out what each person needs from us. Okay, I'm going to stop the share there, and I'm going to stop and draw breath and see what you all have to say.
Thank you for all that information, Jenny. That was really helpful. I'll speak personally while people are coming up with their questions. My grandmother is 98 years old. She lives full-time with my mom, and she has taken a turn recently. She was sharp as a tack, and she took a turn recently that has really shifted her, what we're calling her, that she's turning the corner to 99.
Mm-hmm.
So she's still pretty amazing, although she is bedridden now. But I guess one of my questions is, I always still say I stay very lighthearted with her, and we talk about things that are very simple, one question at a time, basically.
Mm-hmm.
She's eating dinner at the same time. It's a little hard, honestly, probably to chew, to think, and then to have to respond.
Yeah.
Are there strategies that you have, like just about communication, that might be easier to, I guess, either to communicate, number one, or to have them? My strategy is the one question at a time, maybe, but do you have any strategies, I guess, with communication at that age or at that level, for senior citizens?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I love that, Caitlin. And I'm so glad to hear that she's doing well. And yeah, I mean, it's like the reality is we're going to keep changing. And the reality is that our physical bodies are going to die. I mean, we can, it's not the place to argue or discuss what we think might happen after that, and people will have different views, but there's no arguing with our physical body is going to die. So that decline is going to continue, no doubt. I love your one question at a time strategy. And I would say just like be in that moment with her and be guided by her, like, whatever she wants to talk about or doesn't want to talk about, or maybe just wants to be with you. I think we sometimes underestimate the importance of being.
Right.
We're very focused on doing. I've got to have a conversation. I've got to cover these things. Maybe just holding her hands, just sitting with her, being with her, whatever, looking at pictures with her. I don't know, like what, you be guided by your relationship with her. But I think that's really lovely. I'm so glad that you have those opportunities and that she does too. And I mean, like, I know with my mom, so my mom is 91. My mom is mildly cognitively impaired, can be quite repetitive. It depends. Like she came to visit me. She lives in New Hampshire. She came to visit me recently, and I was very shocked by, she seemed to have had a major decline. And when I thought about it for a while, I was like, I think it's probably the disruption of traveling, because when she's home in her own familiar environment, she's a lot more able.
Right.
Yeah. So in my mom's case, like I don't know if it's the case with your grandma, but other people may have relationships with older people who are quite repetitive. And, there can sometimes be this like, oh, mom, I already told you that. Mom, we just talked about that. Don't you remember? And it's like, well, no, my mom doesn't remember. Okay. Because the changes in the brain, the short-term memory goes first. The long-term memory is preserved for longer, which is why my mom can tell you childhood stories from when she was 5 in great detail. And she has forgotten that she just asked me to make her cinnamon toast. So, understanding things like that and just going with it. And then sometimes my mom will stop and she'll go, I just asked you that, didn't I? And I'll be like, yeah, no, it's fine, mom. It's like, we all get distracted. It's like not a big deal.
I think one of the most valuable things that we all can offer is our time. So even clients, perhaps, I know recently I brought lunch over to clients, and the fact that I was not originally going to stay and have lunch with them, but the fact that I stayed and they ate lunch and I just stayed with them and chat, I think it was very valuable. So it wasn't the gesture of let me just drop off food. It was that like our presence was almost their present. Like it was valuable to them in that regard. So
I cannot tell you how much I love that. I want none of you to underestimate the importance of time. And I can only imagine in your profession how pressured you feel to move very quickly and to achieve. And it's a competition. And if you don't get there first, somebody else is going to get there first. But your gift of time is huge. It matters so much. It validates people who are thinking more slowly, moving more slowly, and you're not going to be able to match your speed on a lot of things.
Does anybody else have any questions for Jenny that they can think of? Well, thank you very, very much. If nobody else has any other questions or we really appreciate your time, really, and sharing your expertise. So if there are no other questions, before we end today's event, Lauren, I will ask that you share how much we raised for the Fluvanna SPCA and if we have a winner.
Yes, so we raised $245, which is awesome. And I think I have a fun, oh wait, I didn't even share my screen. I've got a fun little way we can find out who won.
All right.
Let's see who's gonna win.
Yay.
Yes, keep it. Congratulations, Ivy. Thank you. Of course. Again, if you would still like to donate, I did post the clickable link in the chat, and here is the QR code again.
Thank you so much. That's very good. And she won a gift card, if I recall, right?
Yes.
All right. Well, before we leave today, I'd like to just show you some of the upcoming classes and events that CAR is hosting. So you can see on your screen, you can go through the next one. It looks like is next Wednesday, the 18th. There's a lot of CE coming up on the 19th, the 26th. I hope everybody is speed reading all of this. Great information. Thank you, Lauren. Hybrid GRI 507 on the 23rd. That looks like it's all day. When you can register, very good. And this is a GRI class, it looks like. Lots of great stuff coming up, and I'm sure you can also find it on the CAR calendar. And these slides will be available, Lauren, or not?
Slides are not available, but we have been putting them in our class reminders before almost every single class that we have had here at CAR. All these classes can be found, like Caitlin said, on the CAR Education and Events calendar, which you can access through your SSO dashboard.
Perfect. Very good.
Thank you, everyone. It was really good.
Thank you very much for
Yes,
joining
very
us.
good. Thank you.
If you or somebody that you know is interested in YPN and joining us next year, that would be really, really awesome. We would love that people wanted to learn more. We have sort of a, our calendar will be a little bit different next year, but we're still going to have our Latte and Learns and the Salvation Army tree, which is coming up. So be on the lookout for that. You'll see more information on our GMM in November. So you can see the 2 QR codes if you're interested in learning more information about YPN, about our upcoming events. And also, don't forget to register for free classes using the calendar. I hope everybody has a great day, and thank you very much for your time.
Yes, and thank you again to our sponsor, Frank Webster, and the CAR DEI committee for this fabulous event today.
Thank you, DEI, and thank you, Jenny. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. It's
Good
great to be
weekend,
here.
everybody. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.